Okay, today in Honors Biology, we're going to talk about the plasma membrane. We'll talk about its function and its structure. So the function of the plasma membrane is to separate the cells from the external environment. We say that it is selectively permeable. Some people will call it semi-permeable, and that simply means that it controls what enters or leaves the cell. So its job is to let in molecules that need to be in and not let in molecules that shouldn't. So it lets in useful materials such as oxygen and water and sugars, amino acids if you wanted to add that, and then it lets out waste such as carbon dioxide. So your cells produce carbon dioxide in respiration. The structure of the plasma membrane, it is a bilayer, meaning two components to it of phospholipids with proteins embedded in it or stuck in it, however you want to say it. The phospholipid will have both a polar region and a nonpolar region. Okay, so we're going to label some on your diagram. So I had to make a few changes. That looks a little tacky, but make this one kind of rounded if you don't mind. Okay, so this here, this looks like a balloon with two tails, This is your phospholipid bilayer. Okay. The head is the phosphate group. If you'll remember, that's a choline, a phosphate group, and a glycerol. And then these two things here are the fatty acid tails. Okay. The heads, the phosphate head, there's water going to be inside your cell on the outside, so this would be the outside. Down here would be the inside. So there's water outside of your cell and there's water inside, or water containing stuff dissolved in it. The heads are attracted to the water because water has a charge and the phosphate head has a charge, and so we say the phosphate head is hydrophilic. It is attracted to the water. The fatty acid tails are trying to get away from the water, that's why they're facing each other, and so we say they are hydrophobic. Hydro means water. They have a phobia of water. They're just not attracted to it. Okay. Now, in your membrane, I think I drew in some little bitty things here and here. If not, please add them to yours. That represents cholesterol. We'll talk about its function in a minute. So you have cholesterol in your membrane. So you need cholesterol, but your body makes all that you need. And then we have several types of proteins. This protein here that has a certain shape is called a receptor protein. So only molecules that fit that shape can fit there. This protein here with little things attached to it, those are sugars, is called a marker protein. And then this molecule, protein molecule here with the hole through it, is called a channel protein. Now these have other names, but we're going to start out with just this. Okay. And we say that this membrane is a fluid mosaic model, and that simply means that the phospholipids can move side to side. And actually the phospholipids can flip, so this phospholipid here could flip here, okay? And the proteins can move some also, they're just side-to-side movement, but the proteins cannot flip, okay? Also, another thing I need to point out is other organelles in your cells, such as mitochondria, vacuole, and nucleus, also are surrounded by membranes that are fluid mosaic. And so we should most correctly call the membrane around the cell the plasma membrane, because that denotes it or distinguishes it, from the membranes around the organelles, and so we would just call those cellular membranes. The ribosome has no membrane. I forgot to take off the O, so all you gotta do is put N, or just write NO, mark that out. So the ribosome is not truly an organelle. It is some ribosome, it's some rRNA along with some proteins. Functions of the proteins in the plasma membrane. So these proteins all serve certain functions. Some of the proteins will extend through the membrane and some will not. Okay, so transport proteins are also called channel, so we labeled them as channel. They're also called transport. And their job is to allow certain substances to enter or leave the cell. And they're pretty specific about what's going to pass through them. If that channel or transport protein only allows water through it, we give it a special name, and it's called an aquaporin. Okay, so aquaporins only let water through. That sounds like a bonus to me. And then those proteins in the membrane that have a certain shape on their surface are called receptor proteins. So they have a certain shape that molecules called ligands can fit into. And there are two types of receptor proteins. You have intracellular and then you have membrane. Okay? Intracellular receptors are small nonpolar molecules. They allow small nonpolar molecules to cross the membrane and then bind to a protein receptor in the cell, forming a receptor ligand complex. So this is how your steroid or lipid hormones work. So those lipid hormones can come into the cell and then they cause something to happen. Membrane proteins, on the other hand, or membrane receptor proteins, allow the molecule to attach to the protein embedded in the membrane. So here the molecule does not come into the cell. Once the ligand or molecule attaches to the receptor, the entire receptor changes shape, which will cause a change to occur inside the cell. So once again, if it's a molecule attaching to the membrane receptor protein, the molecule does not enter. And then our third type of protein that we have talked about in the cell membrane or plasma membrane is called a marker protein, which also has another name. It's called a glycoprotein because there are glucose molecules attached to it. So these have sugar molecules or glucoses attached to their surface, and they help advertise cell type. So when your cells were forming and then traveling to certain areas to become part of certain organs, so it would say that this cell would be part of a liver cell or lung cell, etc. These markers also help the cells of the organism to recognize cells that belong from foreign matter that does not belong in your body or to go into your cells. Each person has unique markers. So the only person in the world that could have a marker identical to yours would be if you had an identical twin. Marker proteins are beneficial in that they help determine what can enter your cells and not, but if you ever had to have an organ transplant or a person has to have an organ transplant, they can be problematic. And so what they do is they try to find someone with markers close to yours, but then you also have to take a drug to suppress your system so it doesn't reject that organ. Okay, so that is it for the plasma membrane, and so now you will do your Part 3 study guide. Thank you.